Welcome to a very special episode of the Nerds and Friends podcast, where we interview Dungeon Master Tony Krimson from the podcast Enter the Fungeon, which is a very fun, awesome D&D podcast. The link's going to be in the description of this episode below. Go check it out. Tony, thank you so much for joining me today. I really appreciate your time, man.
Thanks for having me, dude. I appreciate you reaching out, man. That was... anytime we could do some cross promotion, I love it. So
exactly. Well, yeah, I went ahead and listened to some of Enter the Fungeon, and I really love the way you DM, not only as a D&D enthusiast myself, but also for making a D&D podcast. So I kind of wanted to talk about both those things today. So, starting out, tell us about Enter the Fungeon, how you thought it up, how it came to be. I want to hear kind of about its origin story.
So basically, me and my group have been together for, a little over 3 years now. And we were consistently getting together, which you should know as a D&D enthusiast, that's not always the easiest thing to do.
Yes.
So
impressive already, just there,
right?
That in of itself.
And we had played a homebrew campaign that I had done that was all Greek mythology based. It was heavily aligned with the original God of War trilogy on PlayStation.
Nice.
So a lot of that stuff that was from that was pretty much directly ripped from God of War, then tweaked a little bit to fit whatever they decided to do.
Okay.
And we were having such a good time playing that, so we did a whole campaign, a whole character arc and everything, and then we decided, all right, let's do a part 2. Nice. So we play part 2, and it takes place hundreds of years in the future, but within the same universe.
Oh, cool. Okay.
And they played all new characters, but all their characters at the end of the first campaign had become Greek gods. And so their characters get to see what their previous characters, influenced in the things that changed in the world and stuff like that. So
that's so cool.
This time, though, because we have such a blast playing, and we always make jokes, and we have such a fun time with the table talk. And we always thought it was so funny, but we would forget a lot of things, and we'd be like, oh man, what was it that was so funny, And so we were like, why don't we just record them, and we'll be able to listen to them whenever we want. So we bought a shitty little microphone that we attached to my, my phone, and we started recording our sessions. So for the entirety of that second campaign, we recorded everything so we could listen back to it. And then,
that's awesome.
Yeah, after a while, we just started talking. We were like, man, we think we're funny. Some of our friends, when we tell them stories and stuff of the stuff we get up to, they always think it's funny. So maybe we should, and we listen to some D&D podcasts. Obviously, we listen to, Not Another D&D Podcast. I watch a lot of Dimension 20. I love Brendan Lee Mulligan.
Nice.
Dungeons and Dads, all that stuff.
Yeah.
And it was I don't even care if anybody listens to what we do. It's for us to remember, So 40 years down the road, when we're in a retirement home, we could listen back and just listen to all the stupid shit we would get into. So we decided to go full bore in, and we bought a digital tabletop, and we got everybody microphones, and we got a whole podcast set up in our garage right now, which we're actually in the process of moving all of it out into our backyard into a shed that we're converting into essentially a tavern for us to play D&D in.
Oh, that's awesome. So you'll have your own place. So you guys all record with everyone in person recording together?
It's all in person.
Oh, that's nice. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's
really so there's no delay or latency between internet connections and stuff. And so it could all be real time.
I really love the pacing that you guys have in the episodes I've listened to of Enter the Fungeon. As a listener, I've always worried that with my ADHD, that listening to a full hour and a half long episode, I'd lose interest. But you guys keep the pacing really good, where I can be doing something else and be listening and taking in what's happening. But I don't know, do you guys go back and edit up the episodes? Or do you just...
I do.
Oh, you do?
I do.
Okay,
I do edit them. So we play for 2 hours.
Okay.
And I always edit them. And granted, just taking the silence out of, me looking in a book for something, or somebody going to the bathroom, or somebody going to get a drink, or whatever the case may be. We have a lot of silences. So we record for about 2 hours, and I get all the silence out of the episode, and then it cuts it to about an hour and a half for me. But believe it or not, not a lot of stuff gets cut out. It's cool. Mostly just silences, and then just stupid mistakes. Or somebody stutters when they speak. I try to clean up everybody's. Sometimes I can't, but I do my best to make everybody sound as good as we can. But yeah, we do edit
You
it.
do a great job. It's really good.
Thanks, man.
Yeah, for
Appreciate
sure.
it. Yeah, no, I do definitely edited it up a little bit and shorten it. And that's why we get, I don't know if you've noticed or not, but if you listen all the way through, at the end of each episode, there's about a 3-second silence, and then there's a piece that got cut out of the episode that's left at the end of every single episode.
It's like a little blooper segment.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So we have one of those every episode. And the funny thing is, like, I try to tie them into something that gets kept into the episode.
Yeah.
So like, there'll be a mistake that somebody made, and then, you know, somebody will make it as a joke later on at the table, like, but in character, they'll make a joke about it. But the original portion of it got cut out. So you'll hear the joke in the episode. And then if you listen to the end credit scene, you'll hear where the origin was of it. And you'll be like, oh, that's where they started talking about, you know.
Oh, that's awesome.
Like in one of our most recent episodes, it was, I had done like the sound of a wolf howling out in the woods. And my player was like, oh, what is that, an owl? And I was like, what? No, that's a fucking wolf. I was like, I didn't say who. So the running joke for the rest of that episode was the players would refer to the wolf noise as an owl in character, so I couldn't cut it. So
that's awesome.
I ended up putting that as the end credit scene, so people knew where the origins of why they were calling it an owl.
That's really cool. I love it. It's like a little Easter egg every episode.
Yeah,
that's cool.
exactly.
That's awesome. Well, I wanted to ask, like, how do you keep the editing process like not like time efficient for you doing that? Like, do you have like a way to like kind of auto edit out those silences, or do you just go through manually?
Yes.
Oh, you do. Okay.
Yes, practice though, bro, because you want to know what? The first, I can't even fucking tell you, man, like how many episodes it was just like the bane of my existence. I was like, oh no, now I gotta edit this, and I would manually go in and highlight the silences and delete them out. But
that's what I've been doing, and it is not efficient.
So what program do you use to edit?
I use DaVinci Resolve.
Okay, so I use but you have video too, right?
We do.
See,
do you use Audacity for your?
I do use Audacity. So they have a I don't know if you would call it a filter or not, but it's called truncate silence. And what it'll do is it'll take all the silences out of the audio for you. The only problem is sometimes you want to pause, right? So, but you could just put that back in as easier than you took it out. So that's not a huge deal. But yeah, a lot of practicing with editing.
Yeah.
We played like 3 or 4 sessions of a offshoot that one of my players DM'd actually, and I was a player.
Oh, nice.
And it's something that we're releasing as bonus content for our Patreon members.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah, so they'll get to hear me as a player instead of as a DM, and I'm a much funnier player, I think. But I'm also like I think I have like a main character syndrome when I'm a player. So
I get that too, which is why I tend to DM more, because then I feel like the impetus is not on me to be like funny or on point all the time. I can just
so the problem with us being DMs is when we play as a player, like you want to help your DM tell an amazing story, and not all players will do that, you know. So you know, if you have a player who's a little bit more shy and more reserved, and they don't go after their story, then you know, I'd rather just sit there and help the DM as much as I can, and we'll riff off each other. And I don't know, I think that's just the DM part of me being a player, you know?
Yeah, no, it's definitely like, it's hard to like, that's why I prefer to do one or the other. Like doing both can be a challenge a little bit, but that's fun though. And that's great that you have like Patreon bonus content for people to come in and like build the world and stuff.
Yeah, so we have a whole after show where we talk about the episode, and so
that's cool.
We'll talk about like mistakes that we made during the episode, or
I love
like
that.
Something that I had to retcon to make it canon and stuff like that. So we talk about and then we'll tell little personal stories, because there are a lot of references that we make in the episodes that are, like I said, because it's for us. We make a lot of references that are just for us. That pertain to our previous Greek mythology campaign. And so we were also talking about releasing that second Greek mythology campaign, as shitty as the audio will be. But releasing that as a bonus at some point we might do, so people can hear some of that. But so what we'll do is we'll tell the story of what happened in the deep dive about whatever that reference was. So like there's a reference in one episode where we talk about the keys being off the table. And so in the Patreon, we actually go through, we tell you that whole story of a time when my girlfriend, I tried to give her a set of keys from a guy. She talked him down in price so much that he was like, you know what, fine, I'll pay you to take these keys off my hands. And she would not let it go, and she was trying to get him to pay her to take the keys. And so he was like, you know what, the keys are off the table, forget about it. So we'll make a joke. We'll say the keys are off the table, and it's a reference to that. And so that's a story that we've actually only ever told on our Patreon. So that's an exclusive for your show too.
Oh, well, thank you. Yes. So everyone go check out the Patreon. That link will also be in this episode description. But no, I love that, because then like if people listen and they're like, oh, I really love this, I want to dive deeper in, you're like, here you go. And it's like, as you guys talk, I mean, everyone listening who's played D&D knows that like before the session, there's the pre-session, just, bullshitting, talking, hanging out. Right. And then there's the session, and then afterwards there'll usually be kind of that after show of, hey, like that was awesome, I really like this mechanic, or oh, your character did an unexpected thing, let's talk about it. And so if you can put that riffing up for people who want to be part of it, that's really cool. I like that.
Yeah, we actually do after the end of every session, and this is something I would recommend for any DM to do with their players, is stars and wishes. We say our favorite thing about the episode or the session. In your case, if you're just playing a D&D game at home, you would say, what was your favorite part about the session? Oh, I really liked when this happened, or my character did this and that was really badass, or whatever. So everybody will give you their opinion of what their favorite part was, and then you'll ask them what their wish was. Like, what do you wish happened that didn't happen? And then they'll tell you. And so it gives you feedback, as a DM, to go, okay, this is the kind of stuff that my players want. So
I love that.
Now I can use it in my next session.
That's so great, because then especially if you have a player where you're trying to really include them, if the focus has been on other characters, you can hear those wishes and what they liked and be like, here's how I can give you more next session. So that's right. I love that. Exactly. That's fantastic.
Really, that's definitely something I would recommend for anybody playing D&D as a DM. So
that's awesome.
And then I give my stars and wishes too, so that my players know what I like, so that they know, okay, he liked it when I role played like that. Cool, I'm going to do that next time too. So.
I really like that. That's really cool. Yeah. While we're talking about advice for DMs, I'm curious, like, what is your approach to session 0, or when you're starting a campaign with new players you're not as familiar with playing with? What are some ways that you set up the group as a whole for success and kind of get everyone on the same page going into a new campaign?
So one of the first things is, unless I have somebody that I feel is really going to be dedicated to it, I'm not going to let them be a spellcaster. You should be a martial class. For your first time. I think anybody's first foray into Dungeons and Dragons, they should play a martial character. Not to say that you can't play a spellcaster, but they're the more complicated part of the game. But if they really want to be a spellcaster, I'm also not going to stifle anybody's creativity or fun, because that's what this game's all about. So I have spell cards. Nice. That way, they can just pick out their cards, and they'll have a deck of cards of, okay, these are the spells that I could do. Obviously people use D&D Beyond or whatever, but I don't know, like I like having physical stuff. So
being able to D&D Beyond's fairly customizable, but I'm big on homebrewing and stuff like that. Yeah. So like if I want to think up a crazy item that gives them some kind of passive ability for a long time, so much easier to do that on pen and paper,
And that's something that I do too, is, I homebrew a lot of my own stuff too, to tailor fit our campaign. Like Faye Earl in the show has this bracelet. It's not a D&D item bracelet. It's something that we created. That's awesome. That plays a huge role in the story so far. So
that's cool.
But yeah, no, as far as, beginning is just not everybody. I don't know all the rules. You know what I mean? Like,
but
I still got to look stuff up. Right. Yeah. I still got to look stuff up. So it's like, I would much rather have them mess up 70, 100 times and have fun than be a stickler about like, oh, you didn't, you added the wrong modifier to that, whatever. But just be patient with people. You don't want to turn, like, our hobby is such a niche hobby that people either get or they don't. There's no in between. And maybe there is nowadays because of podcasts. I know plenty of people who will listen to D&D, like my sister. She listens to our podcast, but she doesn't play D&D, nor would she play D&D. But she enjoys, listening to the show.
Yeah. No, it's really cool. Like, I saw a big boom. I was always into video games growing up, and then like as I was getting older, I saw the boom of like videos and podcasts. Oh, very nice. Oh, I love that. This is the only one I'm rocking right now. Is my
I got that guy up here. It's a gold one, but he's hard to see. But
I love it. Yeah, same design and everything. That's great. Yep. That's so cool. But yeah, no, it was so cool to see the rise of like these podcasts where people would be playing games and like live streaming or reaction videos. And so it's like people who don't really have the time or attention span or preference to sit and play a game, they can still enjoy the game's tone or the
Yeah, like
storyline.
Geek and Sundry was one of the big ones in the
Yeah,
beginning, and watching them just play board games, even, it's just like, man,
exactly.
like it's like, it's just so much fun. So, like I
Yeah.
said, our friends are niche to begin with. So the last thing I want to do is steer somebody away from Dungeons and Dragons by being an asshole to them for their first experience. So
Yeah, for me, the only really challenge I found, like, especially when I'm determining what's too much of a use of rule of cool or too little, I really just gauge it by the table overall. Like,
right,
it's like if everyone is down to just use rule of cool like all the time, okay. Like, but if some people have hard limits, I want to make sure we're not going beyond that for one player. So kind of setting an average, you know.
right, right.
I've learned to accommodate lots of different player styles. The only thing I can't do is if I have a bunch of players with really different styles, I can't accommodate all of them at once.
Right.
So that's where
Right.
I kind of divvy up players and figure out, okay, this group's going to be my folks who are much more like rule lawyers. They want it to be this way. And then my rule
Right.
cool group's over here. So yeah, it helps to divvy it that
And
way.
I don't know. There's a couple rules that I'm very stern on not using the traditional D&D rules for.
I'd love
And
to hear
so,
those.
yeah, so I would tell people right from get-go, like, all right, this is how I DM. If you don't like that now, like, if you want to be more towards the rules, then maybe I'm not the guy for you. But
yeah.
So for rolling for stats, when you roll for stats, you roll 4d6. If you roll any ones, you re-roll the ones.
Nice.
And then you pick your 3 highest. So you roll your 6 numbers, and once you get your 6 numbers, I'll ask you what your lowest number is, and then you'll have a choice to make. You can either re-roll that number and hope it gets higher, or you could not re-roll it and keep what it is. But you could also re-roll it and roll it lower. But I give that the players the option.
I like
so
that.
That's the first. Yeah, that's the first rule that I do that my own way. And then the other 2 rules that I do my own way are revolving around criticals and potions. Ooh. So potions, if they bought a potion or got a potion, like it's healing you for 10 points of like HP. Yeah. I'm not making you roll to see how much HP, whatever the value of that health potion is, greater health potion, whatever. Yeah, they're going to get the max amount. Yeah, they're going to get the max amount of healing that potion can do. Because especially since my players, none of them are really healers, they rely on health potions. Yeah. And you should assume that the people you got them from know how to make a potion, right?
Yeah.
The only exception I would make to that rule would be if they wanted to make their own health potion. Sure, now you got to roll to see how much healing you get because you made it. You want to see the potency.
I like that because then, yeah, you can have kind of make it a whole gameplay element of if they get a mystery potion, how well was this made? What's going to be the actual value of this thing? Or if they make their own, then it becomes how good is your crafting to see what range you get. I really like that. Yeah. So, and then I want to hear about crits because that's always been a thing where, because it's, the rules as written are double the damage dice, but
Right. So also on the potion end, I don't make them use their action to take a potion.
Yeah, I'm a big.
I let them use their interact with not even bonus action.
Oh,
it's interact with an object in our game. You're allowed to interact with one object. A health potion is an object. You can interact with that object. It makes your turn economy way better. It makes your fights more fun. So that's just why I do that. But in terms of crits is max damage plus whatever you roll.
Nice. Okay.
So, but guess what? My monsters do the same thing. So,
okay, I like that. So, like, if you had like a crossbow that does 1d8 plus 3, then
so you would do 8 plus 3 automatically, and then you would roll whatever you roll plus 3.
So it'd be 11 plus a d8. Okay, so it's the max dice plus an extra damage dice of bonus.
Plus the 3 though too. So if it's a d8 plus 3, they still roll a d8 and add that plus 3.
And then 11 on top of that.
And then 11 on top of it. Yep.
I think I might have to borrow that if
it's
you allow
really
it. That's
cool.
Great.
Yeah, of course, dude. Take it, please, dude. That's what D&D is all about. Like, nothing is worse than rolling a nat 20 and then rolling 2 1s on your fucking damage. Like, no. Like a critical should feel critical. So even like I'm strict to that rule. Like I said, same thing for my monsters. If my monsters get a nat 20 on you, I'm sorry, but you're getting hit with all this damage. But
Yeah.
think about my rogue who's adding 4d6s to his sneak attack plus the d4 for the dagger. Like that's 4 plus what, 12 and 12, that's 24. So that's 28 damage automatically.
Oof.
And then whatever he rolls on top of that, you know what I mean? So it's like they feel like a critical hit.
Yeah, well, and that could be epic where it's like, okay, if we've got a really tough enemy, we send that rogue in, there's a risk they might get separated, but then if they deliver on that strike, it's like, yes.
Yep.
Okay, I like that.
Yep.
And the monsters can deal it. I'm curious, I've always, if a monster or usually if a player makes a nat 1 on a roll, if it's kind of a precarious one, then they might fail a little worse than just not hitting. But do you have kind of a hard and fast rule for nat 1s, either for monsters or players? I'm curious. Or
it just depends, like kind of like you said on the situation, right? Like if they're trying to step over something and shoot such, you trip, now you're prone, now you start your next turn prone, or you got to use half your movement speed to stand up, now you can't move as far.
Nice.
But I don't always use nat 1s to punish them either.
That makes sense. Yes.
But if I'm going to do something off the cuff, it's because there was a nat 1.
That makes sense. Yeah.
So
okay.
But and then maybe I'll even describe something happening and not make them take damage, But because it was a critical failure, this is what happens. You drop your gun, now you got to use your action to pick your gun up or whatever,
Yeah, I like that. Awesome. What is are you into making homebrew like monsters or like stat blocks for enemies that they fight?
I've had some in the past.
Yeah.
But a lot of the stuff will always just be something I found in the monster manual or in one of the books that I tweak myself to make sense for wherever they are. When we were doing the Greek mythology campaign, they fought Medusa, and so they have Gorgons in the monster manual.
Yeah.
So I used the Gorgon stat block, but I beefed her up a little bit because it had to make sense for the story. She's not as weak as the Gorgons are in D&D.
Yeah.
So.
Well, because there's one Medusa, whereas the Gorgons are meant to be a various
race.
Enemy. Yeah.
Right.
That's cool. Awesome. Well, what is one of your favorite moments, either like where your players hit you with something unexpected and the way you were able to roll with it as a DM was like your favorite, or just like your most out of pocket, like way a player took something you did and how awesome it turned out? I'd love to hear about just like some highlights from.
Oh God. I mean, in the Greek mythology campaign, I had one of the players, they had a dragon that was with them the whole time. So one of my players it was a familiar essentially.
Nice.
And it was what the hell are those dragons? The Komodo dragons, right? Is that what they're called? The real life dragons that we have.
Yeah.
So it was a Komodo dragon. He was a tiny little dude, so he could ride on the back of that dragon.
Nice.
And he was with them the whole time, and he helped them through this whole campaign. Well, it turns out that he was the bad guy the whole time.
Oh,
and
the Komodo dragon was?
Yes. And so the fucked up thing is they actually there was a moment in this. So two of my players had a familiar, the dragon, and then one of my players had a little pet rat. Yeah. And so there was a part where they had to sacrifice one of them in order to progress in a puzzle.
Oh, wow.
And I expected them to sacrifice, the dragon or whatever, and they ended up killing the rat instead, and it blew my fucking mind. And they ended up killing this rat, and then later on, Mushu was the name of the dragon. Funny enough,
yeah.
Mushu ends up dying, and they use this spell that they had the whole time to resurrect it. So they chose not to use the spell on the rat, and they used the spell on the dragon. And then at the end of it, the dragon, they get to the final fight, and they're confronting the BBEG, and the BBEG is like, "Oh, it's so good to see you. I know you've been doing so much work. Please come here." And then the dragon, comes over to him, and they're like, "Oh no!"
Oh, that's
so
awesome.
They're pissed that they used their spell to rejuvenate him, and then they also didn't kill him when they should have. So he ends up becoming this huge actual dragon.
Yeah.
And then they fight him, and then one of the players ends up riding on its back and stabbing it through the head to kill it, and it crashes down in a bunch of chaos. So that was probably one of my favorite things that happened.
That's
ever.
awesome. And I like, how early did you plant that seed and we're just waiting for it to come to fruition
The
with that
whole time. I
that
knew
whole
the whole
oh, that's
time.
awesome.
Yep.
Oh, that'd be
Yep.
so hard to just like hold that in and be like, when's the right time to reveal it? Oh,
And
that's
it's so
tight.
funny too. With the show, I never realized how much accidental foreshadowing we do in D&D.
Yep.
And it just, now having the podcast and being able to use things from previous episodes and just like, man, oh, we foreshadowed that. We foreshadowed that too. It's just, it blows my mind how much foreshadowing there is. That's unintentional.
Yeah. No, it's, oh man, that,
And then to find a way to loop something back in to mean something that maybe didn't necessarily mean anything to begin with is one of my favorite parts of being a DM. Especially when the, you know, and that's, I think, another reason to go back to the stars and wishes thing, because the players give me ideas of how to fuck with them. You know what I mean? So like, or to blow their mind even.
Something that you were just doing to just like make logical lines between something they could really attach to, and then you're like, oh, that can be the first building block in something awesome.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, that's fantastic. Oh man, that's awesome. I'm trying to think what another question, because I mean, I don't want to spoil anything about where the campaign is going, but for Enter the Fungeon, you're using a lot of homebrew stuff, but it's set in Faerun. It's set in a familiar territory.
Yeah. So when we started talking about doing the podcast, everything that we have done up to this point has been homebrew stuff that was my creation.
Yeah.
Obviously we use monsters from D&D, we use items and stuff, but the world itself and the story was all homebrew. Nice. So when we were talking about starting a podcast, we were like, well, what could we do that will make us a little bit different than all the other podcasts that are already out there? Because there's shit tons of podcasts that people play in D&D. And I was like, well, you know, something that you don't really see too much is people running through the actual modules.
Right.
It's everybody always does their own homebrew campaign. So maybe let's do the modules. And so that's what we decided to do. We started with the Waterdeep Dragon Heist. So that's what the very beginning of
that's what I've gotten
show
to start on. Yeah.
And we went a whole year. So we did a whole year's worth of podcasts
nice.
with just that one book.
That's awesome.
And we moved over to Curse of Strahd.
Nice.
And so that's where the show is now. We're in Curse of Strahd. And then I had we had talked about doing the Curse of the Mad Mage, because they're, you know, eventually hopefully going to find their way back to Waterdeep, and then once they get to Waterdeep, that's where we'll go. But as we're playing it, I'm having such a hard time with the material, because there's just, you know, it's Faerun, it's a well built, and people know it, and I don't know it as well as other people do.
Right. And that's been my hesitation running those, is because like I'm familiar with like it a little bit, but when I homebrew something, if I'm not familiar with what I've created, I can just improv it. I'm not tethered to any expectations, you know?
So but so it's D&D at the same time, right? So we're going to make the world what we make it. And our players interacting with these legendary characters that are, you know, etched in D&D lore forever, that makes them ours. So, you know, like a little bit of a spoiler for something that does happen in the show, but our Durnan has hooks for hands. You know, Durnan, the barkeep for the Yawning Portal, he has hooks for hands. He didn't start that way, but he has them now, and that's something what our Durnan canon has. That, you know, our Volo in our campaign is kind of a little bitch. That, you know what I mean? So it's like it's these legendary characters, but we make them what we make them with our story. So it's been fun to put our own spin on it, but at the same time, it's very stressful to me, because I know it's going to piss people off. With what they've become in our interpretation of them, but at the same time, like, whatever, it's D&D, like that's the whole point.
Well, now that you're saying it, that's been my whole hesitation, and I'm like, why though? Like, if I want to reimagine aspect of it, it's that's what.
And anytime I've gotten a little detail wrong, and then I read in the book later and I go, oh, that I just contradicted what the book said. Well, too fucking bad. Now it's what I said is canon, and that's it. Like, it doesn't matter what the book says. So in the very beginning, I think that was something that stressed me out a lot, was trying to stick as true to the book as I could.
Totally.
And then realizing it's almost impossible. And there's just so much information that I forget things all the time. And then,
of course,
so I think we're going to do a little bit of the Mad Mage in terms of like the labyrinth stuff that they do and use. But the story, after we finish Curse of Strahd, the story is going to be mine from here on out.
That's good. Well, and you're building so much of what you've built in the first two, you know, modules, that it's like you might as well make this, you know, building directly off of that. So that's really cool, though, because that you're really helping remind me that one of the most freeing things I learned as a DM was that if you prepare something or you're going off a pre-written module, if in the game it makes sense to change it for the players to have more fun,
change it.
Yeah. You're not beholden to any standard but your players'
You wanted them to
enjoyment.
go over here and get this one item that you had scripted at that one place, and they don't go there. They go this place instead. Well, guess what? Now that thing is over there. Exactly. It was there the whole time. Yep. You can't tell me any different.
Yep. No, and it becomes so freeing because I used to over prepare, and now I don't under prepare, but like my happy ground for preparation is so doable because it's just a couple points of where I need to hit, and then from there it's like, well, wherever they go, I'm going to lay those few points I need to get to, and it makes it so much easier, and it's more fun for the players. So that's
I really want my players to feel like they have that sense of freedom, and even though I do railroad them to go certain directions, I don't want them to feel like I railroaded them to go into certain directions. I still want them to feel like they have freedom of choice. And for the most part they do. Like, don't get me wrong, I'm not saying that my players don't have freedom of choice, but we do things as DMs to try and steer our parties to where we want them to go, and if they don't go there, whatever, we jump to plan Z.
But and thankfully you have enough control that you can throw up, especially when you get to know your players and their characters, the right roadblocks to put them in the right direction. So if they need to go to a certain place, you can set it up that way. So
exactly.
Oh, that's awesome. Well, I've got another question for you. So besides like D&D and 5e, are there any other systems you've played that you've enjoyed?
No. I almost played one. I wish I could remember the name of it. It's a superhero system. It's not Marvel though. It's I even have like the manuals for it, but I can't remember what the hell the name of it was. But a friend of mine, actually the artist for our show, V Weeks, she wanted to run it. It's a game that she plays, and it's a D6 system instead of the D20.
Interesting.
And it's all superhero. Man, I wish I could. I'll look it up after the call, and I'll
let me
message you and let you know for
I'll
sure.
Put it on the screen so the internet doesn't roast us or anything.
It's it's a superhero. It's a superhero one, and so each person has like quirks, basically, like My Hero Academia, and it's completely different, but also the same because it's still a TTRPG. But I almost played that, but then V ended up moving away, and we didn't get a chance to play it. But
I'll have to check that out.
I've never really D&D has been the only thing, and when I was younger, I dabbled in it a little bit. I don't even remember what version it was then. Maybe 3, maybe 4. Probably 3. With how old I am, but
I was a late bloomer, so I've really only played 5e.
I knew of it because I was just in that nerdy scene as a kid, but like I was Pokemon cards and all that stuff.
Same.
So I was more into that in terms of stuff like that. But cool. As an adult, my girlfriend is actually really into D&D. And she was like, "Oh, have you ever played D&D?" And I was like, not really, not seriously, but I would love to. Like, that's something that sounds so fun. Which is funny to me because I'm not huge into high fantasy. Like Skyrim, I never played Skyrim until like literally last year was the first time I ever played Skyrim. So like, I'm not usually into the high fantasy medieval stuff. Like, I didn't like Game of Thrones. Lord of the Rings is cool. Like, I like Lord of the Rings, but even then I'm not like super into Lord of the Rings either. So I've always been more like Batman. I love Batman. I love superheroes, Marvel, DC,
nice,
stuff like that. And so when we started our homebrew campaign, I wanted it to be that. My girl was like, "I don't want to do superheroes. That's stupid to me. That's stupid." And so we came up on a middle ground because I love Greek mythology and I love the God of War games. So
there you go.
So we ended up doing Greek mythology instead. But I've done like a Harry Potter one.
Nice.
I have a high school reunion one that I do. That's a one shot. So
that's cool. I want to build more one shots to have in my back pocket. But I do think 5e is like, it is kind of constrained to a fantasy setting, but other than that, it is so versatile. So like, I've played a couple different systems, but 5e is by far my favorite to DM in and to play in.
I can give you the notes for my one shot that I made. It's about a high school reunion, but it's probably the coolest thing I think I've ever done outside of the podcast. The story is really mind bending and
really.
And it's a great one shot for new players.
Oh,
Yeah, so it's the one shot that I offer for groups of four to
okay.
come and hang out at the house and play for their first time, or
That
maybe
is
play for the
awesome.
first time in a long time, stuff like that. So I've ran that one shot for like 6 or 7 different groups, and
Yeah,
always positive feedback. And
that's
every
cool.
time I run it, I get better at it too. So each time we play it, the story gets
That's cool.
cooler and cooler. So
Yeah, I do. I want to explore doing more sci-fi TTRPGs because I feel like that's a really fun element. I have played. There's a. Are you a fan of like the Alien movies from the
yeah,
80s?
yeah,
Yeah, they made a system for that that's D6 based. I think that's the only D6 based game I've played, but it was really cool.
that sounds
They
cool.
have a really cool mechanic for like if your character is panicking, where you can like get extra dice to go towards your roll, but the more of those you use, if you get like a one on that extra bonus d6, it becomes like madness. So if you do
Uh,
that too many times, you just go crazy.
Start
And I
to
was
like
like,
drive yourself crazy. Yeah.
yeah, and I was like, oh, that's a really fun mechanic to play with.
Yeah, they
So
have mechanics. They have optional mechanics that are like that in D&D too.
yeah, I've
Sanity
looked at the
mechanics.
madness table for one of my
Mhm.
games recently, but I like the way that one worked, where it's like your character is so heightened that it can give them a boost, but if it goes bad, it starts taking a toll. So
Yeah.
that was
Yeah, that
interesting.
adrenaline takes over, but then the reality sets in that you're being hunted by a fucking alien.
Yes, xenomorphs are very scary. So
Yeah.
that's awesome. Well, I'm curious, do you have any like goals for either homebrew campaigns you'd like to run in the future? Any like cool like homebrew mechanics you want to try out?
um, I mean, it's so hard to think about anything other than the podcast.
Right.
So because the people I play with are the people that are on the podcast with me. So it's like
That make yeah.
we already meet, and so I have another group that I said I ran that Harry Potter for,
Yeah.
and we were talking about possibly continuing that Harry Potter story that we had started,
Yeah.
um, but man, with work and the podcast, and it's just so hard to even just feel prepared for the podcast, and then I have to edit the podcast, which takes usually
Yeah.
takes me about a day to edit a whole episode and add effects and all that stuff and make sure the music's in there. And
Yeah, well, and I noticed like you told me like before I went into Enter the Fungeon that like early on you're like, excuse the mic quality, but when I listened to it, I was like, this is great. And like, the first episode I listened to, I was actually going out for a walk in the evening when I listened to it, and some of the background noise in the tavern, it sounded like it mixed so well that I was like, wait, are there people are my neighbors having a backyard
right.
barbecue? And then I was like, oh wait, this is the podcast. So like, you've got really good levels with your audio mixing, and that's what I aspire to eventually for my little campaign I'm doing over Zoom. So
Yeah, there was in the very beginning I didn't make sure that the audio levels were equal, so there was points where it would be very quiet and then it would get very loud when we were very quiet and then very loud. But I've since learned how to compress audio to make it all this the height would be the highest point would be the same across the board, and then you
okay,
boost the entire track so that it's all essentially the same volume, and it'll still sound lower and higher, but it's not going to blast people's ears when people go from a whisper to a yell.
it just kind of keeps that range a little
Yeah,
more.
yeah.
Okay, that's
Keeps
really
the
cool.
decibels the same, but still has the same inflection in the voice.
That's
So
cool. Yeah, and I've played with Audacity a bit in the past. So I'm gonna try to find a way to convert my recordings into Audacity, do the audio editing there, and then I can sync with the video and do
yeah,
further cuts in
basically,
DaVinci. So
basically, as long as you compress your audio, um, after you've compressed it, you can just amplify it and make it louder. But then it's going to keep all your levels around the same spikes. So
that's cool.
it's the best way to do it, I find.
That's awesome. No, this is like super helpful for me, and hopefully, if anyone else is watching, not to dilute the market too much with all of these awesome
Hey
podcasts,
man,
but it's cool.
there's plenty of room for all of us podcasts, man.
I love
Especially
it.
if we look out for each other, and we
Yes,
promote each other. And there's plenty of time in the day for people to listen to some stuff. So
I know, right? It's so great for multitasking. And while we're talking about that, I mean, shout out to Joshua Hunter, our mutual
yeah,
friend who
thanks,
connected
Jish.
us. Thank you, Jish.
Yeah,
Yeah,
appreciate it. You should
I,
check out his art, the art of Jish.
yes.
He makes some really cool shirts.
Yeah, we're gonna bring him on Nerds and Friends to promote that for sure because I
Yeah,
love his
great,
stuff. He has some great
great.
stuff, so
Yeah, he sure does.
that's in the works for sure. But oh, this has been so fun. So I have one last question to nerd out with you about since you play in person, and a lot of my games are over Discord, Zoom, but I do play in person as well. Do you use miniatures or are you more pen, paper, grid?
Yes.
You're miniatures, yeah.
Yeah, we use miniatures in our our table is a television. So our table has a television built into it, and I cast the maps for them up on there while we're playing.
And then you move the. Oh, that's cool. Oh, that's so much better than building terrain and being constrained to what you've built.
So whenever you guys are listening to the episodes and you hear us in a battle, there's usually a map up for them. Now, occasionally, especially if it's a random encounter, no, we don't use the table, but we use Theater of the Mind for that stuff. But we use maps to help us. And something that we had to get in the habit of was making sure that we actually describe it.
For the podcast, yeah.
Right, because the players would always just go, "Oh, I'm going to go here." And yeah, for us, that's great because we know where here is, but we're not a video podcast or audio only. So we all had to get better about explaining what we were doing and where we were going and stuff to try and paint that picture for the audience. And I feel like we do a decent job of making people envision what we're seeing. So
that's really cool. And I just, for my in-person games, that is my new bucket list goal, is to get a
I'll send you a picture. I'll send you a picture after we're done recording.
I love it. Yeah, that's really cool. Because I'm just, my DM brain is spinning now with the possibilities of, I can find like an overhead view or build a map on Incarnate and then just have them move their okay.
Yep. You can even use like Owlbear Radio and stuff like that, like interactive maps, and have it up on the screen. And then you just run it from your tablet. You could even use Roll20 or whatever.
Yeah.
Use your tablet to control the stuff that's on the screen and have the screen casted on them. So
that's epic.
And it works perfect for us too, because we're recording on a computer. So one screen is the recording and then the other screen is the table. And so I just drag stuff over and show it to them. So
the modern DM screen right there.
Yep.
That is epic. Well, that is so cool. So really quick, last question before we go. Tony, thank you so much for your time. This is so exciting. And again, remember, listeners, check out Enter the Fungeon. It is awesome. I'm a follower on Spotify. I give you guys 5 stars because it is so much fun.
Awesome,
I can't wait to listen all the way to see how you guys transition to Curse of Strahd. But I guess my final question is, what is the one class that you've never played as a player that you want to someday?
See, the hard part is like, would I be good at it, right? I usually play Monk. Monk is usually my go-to class.
Okay.
It's great for beginners. So if you're a new player, Monk is a great beginner class. But a class that I haven't really played, I think I could probably be a badass rogue. I've never been a rogue before.
Ooh, yeah.
And I think I could do a good job. Our rogue isn't the greatest. You'll hear us pick on him throughout the episodes. But
depending on how their character is, that can actually really fit the character. Which is
no, it does. It fits Rigsy for sure. But but yeah, no, I've never really been rogue, and I think I could probably come up with a pretty broken ass rogue.
Well, I hope that it's recorded so I can see that one day. But Tony, this was so fun. It's so great to meet you over here. This is really cool that we collaborated on this. And everyone, again, check out Enter the Fungeon. This was really awesome, man. Thanks so much for your time.
Yeah, man. Absolutely, dude. I'm glad you asked us to come out, man. And I can't wait to, promote your show.
Thank you.
On our show as well. And like I said, we give shout outs at the end of every episode. So
sweet.
We'll give you more than one. And I'm going to have you send over some audio. That way I can play just a clip of you talking about your show and what it's about. So
absolutely. Well, perfect time. My cat's about to walk on the thing. And so that's awesome. Well, thank you so much, Tony. This was great. I'm going to go.